With the example of Jonathan Irons, this video warns some African Americans about their wrong choice of the most ungodly, unscrupulous alliance partners. Hello, friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. Only America has the need to have a national center for missing and exploited children and an organization called the Innocence Project. Why? Because millions of adults, infants, and children had simply disappeared without a trace from the early 1960s to the early 2000s. The Innocence Project became necessary when it was discovered that many people had been wrongly convicted of crimes they did not commit, jailed for life, or executed. In this video, I am going to discuss just the persons wrongly convicted of crimes they did not commit, not due to some error, but deliberately and diabolically. In man's system of justice, it's possible for a person to be wrongly convicted in error, but that should be a rare occurrence because of the system of justice in the United States if the process is carried out by people of integrity. But from the early 1960s to the early 2000s, the process of trying people for crimes was deliberately perverted to wrongly convict innocent people with planted evidence and deliberately falsified forensic testing and evidence. The existence of wrongful convictions was discovered only after 2000 when the full extent of the evil deeds and atrocities of the German masqueraders were discovered. Wrongful conviction of innocent people was one of the forms of evil practiced by them to the fullest extent that they could. Crooked policemen planted evidence, witnesses gave false testimony, and forensic laboratory technicians falsified tests under threats where necessary to get convictions. Then some German masquerader jury members would also do their best to sway other jury members to falsely convict the accused. Such was the case of Jonathan Irons, a black teenager who on January 14, 1997, at the age of 16, was arrested for the alleged shooting of a 38-year-old white homeowner Stanley Stotler during a burglary. Stotler survived the shooting. No DNA, fingerprint, footprint, or other physical evidence collected ever linked Jonathan Irons to the crime. After a two-day trial on October 20th, 1998, Irons was convicted by the jury of first-degree assault, armed criminal action, and first-degree burglary. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison. His appeals against conviction were all denied. In 2007, evidence was discovered that indicated police and prosecutorial misconduct. In 2007, Maya Moore, WNBA star of the Minnesota Lynx, this is the Women's National Basketball Association, star of the Minnesota Lynx, met Jonathan Irons through a prison ministry program. In 2019, she decided to take 1 year off from her WNBA career to fight for Jonathan Irons' defense and funded the hiring of defense attorney Kent Gibson, who specializes in post conviction defense. On the National Registry of Exonerations website, this is how police misconduct in Jonathan Irons' case, as well as prosecutorial misconduct, is reported. In 2018, attorney Kent Gibson had filed a state petition for a writ of habeas corpus challenging Irons's convictions. The petition asserted that the prosecution had failed to disclose the fingerprint report and had allowed Deputy Detective Lutenhouse to testify falsely about the fingerprints. The petition also asserted that Detective Michael Hanlon, who claimed that Irons had confessed but that he had destroyed his notes, had maintained a blog after he retired. In the blog, Hanlon bragged about his illegal and unconstitutional police misconduct during his tenure on the force. This misconduct included planting evidence at crime scenes to cover up misconduct, manufacturing false evidence to obtain a search warrant, and failing to report the misconduct of other officers. This is strongest possible police misconduct. In March 2020, Circuit Court Judge Daniel R. Green granted the petition and vacated Irons's convictions. The judge noted that the prosecution had conceded that the fingerprint report had not been disclosed. In fact, evidence showed that the bottom portion of the original report that showed that one fingerprint was unidentified apparently had been covered up when it was copied. The report that was disclosed was the sanitized version. Judge Green said the disclosed portion of the report would have been unassailable forensic evidence to attack the state's case and support Irons's claim of innocence. This is gross prosecutorial misconduct. The website continued. The judge also noted that Irons's trial defense attorney had failed to call a witness, Michelle Bachmann, who would have placed Irons at a location that was far enough from Stotler's home that it was logistically difficult, if not impossible, for Irons to have committed this crime. Moreover, the judge faulted Irons's defense lawyer for failing to establish that the gun presented in evidence had no connection either to the offense or to Irons and probably should not have been admitted into evidence. This shows that the defense, prosecutors, police, and possibly even the jury were colluding to get this conviction. The website continues. Judge Green also cited the testimony at an evidentiary hearing from Dr. James Lampinen, a University of Arkansas psychology professor who reviewed the eyewitness identification factors in the case. Lampinen said that the photograph of Irons used in the photographic lineup was significantly larger than those of the other five men in the lineup. Lampinen determined that Irons's head was 25% larger than the average of the other photos, making Irons's photo inherently suggestive based upon size alone, Judge Green said. Lampinen was critical of the police officers who suggested that Stotler make a guess when viewing the lineup. He also said that Stotler's identification had evolved from virtually no description on the day of the crime to a very specific description of Irons and his clothing. Lampinen testified that the likely explanation was that Stotler's identification was based on suggestive outside factors rather than memory. Judge Green concluded that the verdict in this case was not worthy of confidence and vacated Irons' conviction in March 2020. But the state of Missouri Attorney General's office appealed the ruling, which the Missouri Supreme Court rejected on July 1, 2020, and Irons was released. In September 2020, Maya Moore announced that she and Jonathan Irons had married. In March 2021, Jonathan Irons filed a civil rights lawsuit against St. Charles County and the officers involved in his arrest and conviction. I wish Jonathan Irons and Maya Moore a blessed married life and hope Jonathan Irons wins adequate compensation for the more than 23-year-long wrongful incarceration. Another case recently in the news is that of 62-year-old black man Kevin Strickland, who was convicted in 1979 of a triple homicide of Larry Ingram, 21 years, John Walker, 20 years, and Sherry Black, 22 years, that took place in April 1978 in Kansas City, Missouri, and received a 50-year sentence without the possibility of parole. Strickland always maintained that he was never involved in that crime. All criminal charges against Strickland were dismissed on November 23, 2021, and he was released after 43 years in prison, one of the longest prison sentences served by a man wrongfully convicted. He was not eligible for any compensation from the state of Missouri, but through a GoFundMe page set up on his behalf by the Midwest Innocence Project, he has received over $1 million in donations so far from thousands of contributors. Hopefully, more will be contributed so that Kevin Strickland can at least enjoy the rest of his life. On the day of the crime, four persons were shot, three died. The fourth person, Cynthia Douglas, survived the shooting. She initially testified that Strickland was at the scene of the murder. She also identified two other persons, Vincent Bell and Kellen Adkins, as two of the perpetrators who pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and served 10-year sentences. They insisted that Kevin Strickland was not involved in the murders with them. They identified two other suspects who were never charged with the crimes. For 30 years, Cynthia Douglas stated that she made a mistake by falsely identifying Strickland being at the scene due to police pressure and worked through the Midwest Innocence Project in attempts to have Strickland freed. She died in 2015. Senior Judge James Welch, who dismissed all charges against Strickland, stated in his judgment that no physical evidence linked Strickland to the crime scene and that a key witness, Cynthia Douglas, recanted before her death. This is another clear case of police and prosecutorial misconduct. The National Registry of Exonerations has 2,891 cases of exonerations since 1989 in which innocent victims served more than 25,600 years in jail for crimes they did not commit. Each of these exonerations tells a similar harrowing tale as the cases of Jonathan Irons and Kevin Strickland. You can read about them on the National Registry of Exonerations website. Now, who's behind it all and why? You will notice that many of these wrongful convictions occurred before 2001 on the National Registry of Exonerations website. The National Registry of Exonerations did a study in 2017 and found the following results. As of October 15, 2016, the National Registry of Exonerations listed 1,900 defendants who were convicted of crimes and later exonerated because they were innocent. 47% of them were African Americans, three times their rate in the population. About 1,900 additional innocent defendants who had been framed and convicted of crimes in 15 large-scale police scandals were cleared in group exonerations. The great majority of those defendants were also black. Judging from the cases we know, a substantial majority of innocent people who were convicted of crimes in the United States are African Americans. Out of the total 2,891 convictions, 1,128 or 61% of them were before 2001 and earlier. They were also incarcerated for longer periods. Those wrongfully convicted after 2001 were exonerated much quicker. DNA analysis and electronic surveillance have contributed to that result. But the main reason is that the convictions after 2001 were exonerated much quicker is that German masqueraders' activities were fully unmasked by 2001 and they were no longer in total control to deliberately wrongly convict innocent persons. They were no longer in total control of the justice system. African Americans are only 13% of American population but constitute a majority of innocent defendants wrongfully convicted of crimes and later exonerated. They constitute 47% of the 1,900 exonerations listed in the National Registry of Exonerations as of October 2016, and the great majority of more than 1,800 additional innocent defendants who were framed and convicted of crimes in 15 large-scale police scandals and later cleared in group exonerations. They too were African Americans. Judging from exonerations, innocent black people are about 7 times more likely to be convicted of murder than innocent white people. So, African Americans need to know how these wrongful convictions were discovered. The existence of German masqueraders began to be discovered after 1996 when the federal government overcame a legal hurdle to be able to carry out electronic surveillance. I've explained how this occurred in the past, but here is a brief account. Before 1996, the German masquerader Chief Justice William Rehnquist of the United States Supreme Court controlled who the federal government could subject to surveillance. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, had terrorized all Americans, including government officials and even the military, by filing lawsuit after federal lawsuit for violating the privacy of citizens. So no one could be put under electronic surveillance unless permission was obtained from the courts, a process controlled overall by the Office of the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. So they simply did not give permission to put murderers, German masqueraders, and their allies under surveillance. That is why they got away with 10 million murders and untold millions of other crimes. Around 1990, I was put under electronic surveillance by the federal government because my church's preaching about prophecy about the military defeat of the United States and British Commonwealth nations at the hands of a German led alliance. The United States government wanted to discover any possible conspiracies within the church to bring that result about. Because I was under surveillance, all those who interacted with me automatically came under surveillance incidentally. When their illegal activities were discovered, the US government then could legitimately put such persons and whoever they interacted with under surveillance. That is how the existence of German masqueraders was discovered. The depth of their involvement in crimes continued to be discovered till 2001. It was during such discoveries that the German masquerader conspiracy to convict innocent people of murders and other crimes was discovered. As already stated, African Americans were the main victims of this conspiracy, with whites of non German ancestry being the secondary victims. My purpose in revealing all this is that many African Americans have cast in their lot with German masqueraders. I just want to point out that German masqueraders have always been using African Americans for their own nefarious purposes. They and no other white Americans were solely behind the wrongful convictions of innocent African Americans, their long imprisonments, and even executions. So only the German masqueraders were responsible for this. I want African Americans to open their eyes to see the true nature of the masqueraders. They use people when it suits their purposes, then they discard them, even to the point of killing them when those purposes have been accomplished. You also need to know that there are no German masqueraders involved in the innocence projects around the United States. It is African Americans themselves and white Americans of non German ancestry who are pursuing cases to exonerate people wrongfully convicted. They, that is, white Americans of non German ancestry, were the first to discover that German masqueraders were involved in these evil activities. What you may not know is why German masqueraders committed such heinous crimes and destroyed the lives of many people, chiefly African Americans. The reason is that they believe that there is no such thing as a God who brings those who commit evil acts to justice. Their God is Satan, the devil, whom they worship and obey almost without question. They believe it is possible to get caught for a crime, but also get away with most crimes without any consequences when the crimes are committed carefully and all bases are covered. There is no God as mentioned in the Bible bringing the evil to justice according to their beliefs. So they have no qualms about committing such crimes. In fact, they commit them to prove to themselves that there are no consequences for committing such crimes and that there is no Almighty God as mentioned in the Bible to hold such criminals accountable. I hope African Americans are now better informed in evaluating their alliance with German masqueraders. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the video. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the facility to make the text of my videos available on YouTube. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that capability. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which you can easily copy.